Okay, I'm really excited to be live here with Matt from Mountain and Johnny from Northbeam. We're going to talk CTV and measurement. I'm really excited to do this because I think that this is starting to become more and more of a pain point for people, and it's a growth opportunity. And I feel like we've been gatekeeping this for a while, and I'm really excited to kind of share some of the things that we've learned and some of the stuff that we've been able to scale our brands with. But I'm going to start us off. Matt, if you can introduce yourself, just say a few words about you and Mountain, that'd be great.
Happy to, Samir. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Matt Collins, and I am the Vice President of Product Marketing for Mountain. For those who may not know, Mountain is a self-serve advertising platform built for streaming and for outcome-driven marketers who are showing up needing to drive some kind of a full funnel metric. And we help thousands of customers and agencies do exactly that.
Amazing. Thank you. And Johnny, talk us a little about you and Northbeam, please.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Johnny Crane. I'm on the partnership team here at Northbeam. So that means I work with our top agency partners like Query, but also our top tech partners as well, like Mountain. So Northbeam, for those of you who don't know, we're an independent measurement platform. So we sit outside the ad platforms. We pull that actual order data and score every paid channel on the same basis. So you actually get a read on what's really driving revenue instead of 5 platforms each claiming the same conversion. So excited to be chatting today and more about Hook.
Yeah, this is awesome. This was really important. And I think what we're going to talk about today is actually one of our clients where we were able to scale their revenue because we brought in both Northbeam and Mountain together. And it was the synergies between our media buys and the strategy that allowed us to scale this business and to scale the top of funnel specifically. I know a lot of people are talking brand awareness, and this was one of those times where it was wildly successful and wildly measurable. So I'm really excited to chat about that. So actually, let's jump right into the problem. So what is the problem that we tend to see consistently? So we work with Hook. They're a fishing apparel brand. We knew that they needed to invest in brand awareness. They had a full funnel mix: Meta, Google, Bing, TikTok. They were already running CTV and endemic placements. And we were actually trying to increase the CTV budgets. The problem with that is the previous vendor's CTV self-reported conversions were overstated relative to actual Shopify orders. So anyone that looks at platform attributed knows this, but this was a little wild. It was 3x total Shopify orders. And we were like, guys, I don't know that actually makes sense. And so we need your help to determine how we can actually measure this. One of the things that we can do is we'll model off of GA4 last click data, but for Meta, you can do that because you do get some last click data. For CTV, there's nothing there. So there is no in between 0 and 3x the Shopify orders that you're getting. And so we really needed to figure out, how do we actually know if CTV is driving new revenue? We clearly didn't have the tools to actually answer that question. And we really wanted to scale this channel. We intrinsically knew that this was a strong investment channel for the business and could help us unlock a lot of growth. How do we know that? All the tertiary KPIs. So brand search was flat, brand health scores were flat, branded search campaigns couldn't scale, and similarly Meta was plateauing as we scaled up. So we knew we needed to go into an area with efficient CPMs that could reach net new audiences. So why upper funnel and measurement together? Why do we look at both together? Well, for us, when we were looking at it, when we're trying to justify CTV investment, it's really hard to get investment in it when no one trusts the data. So a great media buy you can't measure becomes something that just gets trimmed. And that's what was starting to happen. We were starting to feel that uphill battle against really trying to ask for more funds to invest CTV, but the feedback was always, well, I don't know if it's working. I know your other channels are working, so let's scale back on CTV. And then on the attribution side, on the measurement side, we really needed something to be able to compare and contrast against. So even if CTV was working, if our next best dollar was actually going to be on Meta, it really didn't matter that CTV was working. And so we needed clarity around where we were on our diminishing return curves and in comparison on all of the different channels. So 2 decisions became 1 decision. Pick a CTV partner that we really trust and a measurement model together. And so that became pieces of the requirement. Johnny already touched on this, that Northbeam connects into Mountain directly, and it's a great integration for us on the agency side. So that became a really simple decision on our end. So we went to Mountain and said, hey guys, we need to actually start to scale into this. How do we actually do this? We came to Mountain because we have found that they reach, engage, and convert more in-market customers. So to us, strongest CTV performance, access to premium inventory, and the best media value. Matt, I will let you add in on this as much as you want to.
Yeah, thank you, Samir. When going on a little bit more than 4 years ago, when I was considering Mountain as a potential employer, I was reflecting on the things that I really believed about where the marketing industry was going. And I think the arc of marketing is bending towards more and more accountability. And that doesn't necessarily mean return on ad spend and, subscribers that a business may gain through their marketing or advertising. It could mean healthier brand metrics. But the idea being that being able to measure it and then make better decisions because you possess the data is something that I feel strongly. The second is democratization, that more brands will be able to participate in channels and using tools that maybe 10, 15 years ago were off limits to them for maybe because they were priced out. And Mountain believes those things at the core as well. And so when we talk about the CTV ad platform built for performance marketers, it is predicated on the notion that more than or better than other platforms, Mountain is able to identify the portion of a total addressable market that is in market to buy now, if not soon. And data tells us that maybe only in any given time, when you look at a total addressable market, maybe 10 to 15% of potential buyers are ready to take their wallets and their purses out right now to spend. And the others may buy at some point down the line, 1 month, 2, 3 months down the line. But the ability to find them quickly and to be able to engage and convert them quickly is really what separates Mountain from other tools. And we do that through 3 sort of pillars that make us stand out. And they're listed here, which is the best performance, the best inventory, and best value. And the way to describe these is to contrast them with the alternative. So when I say best performance, I mean to contrast it with performance that fails on 2 tests. One, it's not durable. So it shows up maybe 1 week or 1 day or 1 month, but then it vanishes and it's not clear why it disappears. The other part of performance that can make it wobbly in other environments is that you don't trust it. And this is where partners like Northbeam are so important, because having a third-party assessor of the homework, to use a turn of phrase that all of us are familiar with in this industry, really brings an air of trust. And Samir, as you rightly point out, if you don't have trust, if you don't have transparency into the way these platforms operate, it really erodes everything else that can otherwise unlock their value. When I talk about the best inventory, here again, I'm contrasting it with alternatives. Our industry, the television industry, is very fragmented. And so the alternative for many advertisers who would like to get their businesses on streaming is to go door to door to the premium streaming publishers, buy the inventory that they can, and then through their own modeling, stitch together the things they need to construct a well-devised media plan that has a point of view on things like reach, frequency, but then importantly, outcomes, like what is this going to achieve for us? That's become increasingly difficult to do. And so platforms like Mountain, which take largely an audience-based approach, also enabling other forms of targeting, really simplify that fragmentation problem. And then the third is value. When we talk about value, it really is meant to be an expression of what do you get versus what do you give. And in our industry, especially in just broadly the digital video ecosystem, inventory is, to contrast it with what we mean by the best value, inventory is sometimes preemptible. And so, for example, you can buy television advertising, but it's a preemptible form of TV advertising that another advertiser can swoop in and outbid you at the last minute. If you're relying on a Mother's Day sale or promotion, you can't have inventory that you can't count on and miss the opportunity to deliver the impressions and the message that you have. A lot of digital video shows up in the form of skippable formats. And so it makes it easy for people who want to avoid advertising to be able to avoid advertising. Or it's shown in what we would think of as like remnant spaces. So weird day parts, times of day, where the audience quality is questionable. And so Mountain prides itself on delivering inventory on maybe not the most networks. Maybe, we pride ourselves on having support for over 150. There are others where you can get several hundred, but our experience tells us that it's the more premium the environment on the larger screen, not a mobile screen, and where you can get that unskippable delivery in a lean back environment are the things that really are the hallmark of the great results that businesses expect when they come to us.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that in terms of just how we actually buy on Mountain. And I think that, Query being a media agency, we recognize that the best way is to actually use the tools in their best way. And that's when you get the really great outcomes. So for us, when we're looking at CTV, the key piece here is it needs to be the right audience and the right context. And so that's why we worked with Mountain on this, because of the premium engagements and the premium channels, premium placements. So a lot of CTV runs on blunt household income and age cuts. There's a lot of self-reported data and a lot of data sets, household income, in market for X, in market for Y. And if you've ever run CTV for an automobile dealer, in market for cars is like a giant audience set, and yet it never works. And so everyone's like, well, what's the point of this data? And then a lot of times what we do is we also see a lot of CTV vendors that come back with whatever is the cheapest, right? And to us, there's a balance between your audience and the context. It's not helpful if you are driving the best audience on Tubi, for instance, all day long. For us, we really want the best audience when they're in the mindset of. And the reason why that's important is because on CTV, a lot of it's also household targeting, right? And so when you do the right audience, you may be targeting the right household, but you might be getting the kid who's watching on Tubi, not the parent who's watching on Peacock. And you ultimately want the parent. So how do you make sure that you're getting the right audience within the household as well? And so for us, we want the right strategic audience that we can describe, the shows and channels that person watches, and then to Matt's perspective, that premium non-skippable placement. We want to make sure that it's actually being watched. Now that does put a lot of onus on the creative, because if it's non-skippable, it needs to be an ad that's actually worth watching, and it needs to be something that's engaging and interesting. So this is kind of where your creative needs to flex for it. For us, context isn't a layer on top of targeting, it is the targeting. The premium programs tell us who's watching. It's better than broad programmatic more often than not. And interestingly enough, the more data you layer on a programmatic buy, the more it costs, to the point where you might just be better off buying broadly on a premium channel and just eating the waste. And doing that math is really important and key here. So again, contextual targeting at the right cost, premium context, not a license to overpay. If the CPM doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense regardless of where it is. So really kind of doing that old school GRP, what's my reach and frequency against my CPM, is really important. One of the biggest gotchas that you will get when working with a CTV vendor or a media agency for that matter, and something to be really careful of, is a lot of vendors bundle their display remarketing banner assets and their CTV video CPMs. And that's a really great way of making it look like you've got a blended CPM of $4, when in reality, you've got a $60 TV CPM and a $1 display banner CPM, and that's why it looks like that. So when you're working with a CTV vendor, when you are working with a media agency, always ask for your CTV video CPMs versus any display remarketing CPMs as separate, so ask what's in the blend, and then judge the channels too, because you can ask for CPMs at the channel level to have a better understanding of what that's going to look like. This is one of the reasons why we like working at Mountain. They don't do this, and we're actually able to manage against all of this. So for us, when we were doing this buy, it was, we need to know, is the premium CPM a good decision or expensive mistake? And then we needed to make sure we could trust the CPM. And then we wanted to measure all of this. We needed to also understand, okay, we've got great premium contextual placements. We've got a really good CPM, but is it actually working? And was it better than just adding another 100K to Meta? And so that's where Johnny and Northbeam came in. That's where we started working with clicks and deterministic views across all of our channels, not just CTV. We needed to understand what it looks like when we compare and contrast against everything we're running. Johnny, I would love you to talk a little bit about clicks and deterministic views so people can just understand what it is and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of before I get started, let me define deterministic, because I think view through has been abused for about a decade now. And I'm sure we have several skeptical people on this call. And if you're skeptical, you've definitely earned it. So just at a really high level, platform reported view through is the platform grading its own homework. It saw an impression, it saw a conversion somewhere, and in its own walled garden on its own look back window, it claims the pair. So you can't really audit that, and you can't really compare it to anything else. Deterministic is a different standard. So it's not a softer one. It means that we match on an exact identifier. So that could be an order ID or a hashed email. So this is going to be a real view tied to a real order. This isn't inferred. There isn't fuzzy math. It's not guessed. If we can't make the match, we don't claim that conversion. So the way I think I would say it is that deterministic, it's deterministic in the same way clicks only is deterministic. We didn't lower the bar to let the views in. So we basically raised the bar with this new attribution model. So there are a few guardrails that we put into place to help make sure that no advertiser could break this model. So views get pooled per platform. So serving more impressions just dilutes their own credit. And clicks and views inside that 30 seconds get deduped. So the simplest version, just to kind of tie this all in, of why this changes what you're looking at, we as marketers know that customers see ads all the time that influences their purchase decision that they don't click on. Somebody sees an ad on one platform, 2 on another, 3 on the third, never clicks, then buys. If you're using that last click measurement, that's going to show up as branded search, or organic. Under CTV, though, that journey splits into real proportional credit across all of those three, and the direct gets nothing because the direct was just the last step. It didn't actually start the customer journey, and it didn't start the same order. So just to wrap up, and this only works because everything's on that same basis, the same rules, same window, no channel gets a special case. This is what makes it a budget tool instead of just a CTV tool. So obviously we're talking about how it affected CTV, but the question was never, is CTV good? It is CTV better than whatever else I'd put this money into? And that's a comparison, and a comparison that only works if everything was measured in the same way. And that's what clicks and deterministic views allows us to do.
Yeah, and so for us, Northbeam ended up becoming the source of truth for all of our media for our client. We were able to really quickly understand what's driving new visits, where are we getting new customer revenue from, and then and more importantly, have the confidence and the clarity to be able to make really good budget decisions that we were able to then go back to leadership and ask for additional funds for funding Mountain. So let's actually talk about how that came. So January 2026, we actually implemented this. 2 things that we wanted to make sure happened. So why we chose Mountain, verify visit tracking, and native Northbeam integration. We knew Northbeam needed to be our measurement stack here. So that's kind of how we did that. It was a really big driver of wanting to make sure that we would learn something. That was the goal here. So what did we learn? Well, it turns out Mountain ends up having the highest new customer rate by channel. So actually, our CTV channel, and this is current to date, is 94% new customers. And it's been able to actually scale the brand. Put it in comparison to the other channels we're running. Other channels are 74, 67, and 49%. So you can see, when we need to drive new customer acquisition, Mountain has ended up becoming a major driver of that. The beauty of that is Northbeam is the one that made this view feasible. And so you can kind of see how this comes together. And it became really easy to ask for additional funds to continue to drive new customer acquisition. It also, we did have a previous CTV vendor for all those that are tracking from the beginning. We saw a 49% improvement in our CPM when looking at video specifically, and a 5x verified visit rate. So not only were we getting cheaper CPMs, but because of the way the campaigns were structured, we were reaching people in the context that mattered the most, and they were actually engaging with the creative as well. So it was a win-win all around. So 2 decisions came out of it. So because we have the clarity and the understanding of how the campaigns are performing and what's working, we could actually allocate more money into it. So CTV continues to scale, and it continues to be a major growth driver. But Northbeam also allowed us to do some creative testing on the CTV ads itself. So now we're able to have a really good understanding of, okay, well, let's do lifestyle creative and show like brand positioning and brand marketing versus what if we do a singular product focused creative and just run a campaign test around that. Having that ability to actually see the impact of those two and read out what works and what doesn't work for the brand meant that not only could we test the channel itself, but we could now test the actual execution of the channel as well. And that's been huge for us. One of the key lines that we'll say pretty regularly is, if you're going to measure something, it better have an impact on something. So a measurement without action is just curiosity. And curiosity is fine, but let's actually go into this and saying we're measuring this because we expect an output of this. It's old school high school science class. Like, let's do scientific methodology. What's our hypothesis? How are we measuring it? What's the output going to be? That really helps us understand what's working and what's not working. So what's going on now? 7 days from launch to now, 70 days from launch to an always on channel. So we ran it as a test. It wildly exceeded our expectations. And now Northbeam plus Mountain is a key piece of our scaling strategy. This strategy helped us put together a full program that allows us to drive real decisions and scale really effectively. So if I'm leaving you guys with 4 things to take back, upper funnel and measurement strategy, it is a together. You do not think about them as separate. Upper funnel, because it's so difficult to measure, needs to have a good understanding of what your framework for measurement is. The key piece of that, though, is measure everything the same way. What we tend to see is people invest in upper funnel and say, okay, great, I'm going to do brand health tracking, and that's going to be my measurement of upper funnel. The hard part is that doesn't allow you to then compare it against your bottom of funnel or even mid funnel, because you're not running brand health tracking on those and you're not holding them to the same KPI accountably. So really think around, how are we going to structure everything in the same way so that we can actually measure things. We like to judge upper funnel on net new customers or reactivation of old existing customers that have fully lapsed. Make sure you have those definitions. Make sure you understand what that is. Is a lapsed customer 1 year out, 2 years out? Is it a net new, always new to file? Having all of that determined ahead of time is key. And then really understand, how are we actually scaling new customer growth, not just revenue? And then make sure your dashboards and your data views drive decisions, and they're not just there to have pretty numbers. Know what you're trying to actually measure, know what matters, and then scale from that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my friends here to talk about 2 takeaways each. So 1 that you can do today, and 1 to think about as we're coming into Q4 planning and going into the end of the year. So Matt, I will kick it off to you with Mountain. What is the one thing that you need to do this week, and what's for the year?
Well, drawing on what you just shared, Samir, I'm going to offer one thing to think about this week, especially if you're maybe a new to TV advertiser, new to TV business, and you're just close to standing up your campaign, or maybe you've just launched it recently, is to think back to the slide that you shared a moment ago about 70 days to get from, we're just starting to now being always on and having the playbook really hardened. My point is that every channel has its own baking time and temperature, and CTV is one of them. And it's a mistake generally to come in and say after a week even, oh, we're starting to see this data come in, let's leap to making consequential decisions about audience and creative and budget. Let it go. And working with experts like Query can help you know, okay, here are the windows for making those key decisions. So that's the one thing that I would think of in the moment. For the year, there are really two big levers, I think, that drive effectiveness in advertising, the biggest ones. This is a simplification. One is your audience strategy, but the other is creative. In fact, NCS, formerly known as Nielsen Catalina Solutions, has studied this on and off for the better part of the last decade to look at all of the inputs that drive marketing outcomes. And they look at things like recency, channel, creative, and their findings consistently show that creative is responsible in the CPG category for 50% of all outcomes. Everything else combined is the other 50. So this is the time to be thinking about your creative strategy, especially for brands that have to make Q4. This is an ideal moment to really button up your creative strategy. So as you go into Q4, you're not having to guess about what works with what audience. You've done the testing, you've done the legwork, and you have the creative in hand that you're going to need to go out and win. So don't overlook the power of creative.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that, Matt, just on the creative side. I think creative strategy, to just give a perspective around that. I think a lot of brands struggle with understanding what creative strategy is, and a lot of marketers understand how to actually measure creative strategy. I think the key thing here is having a really structured way of understanding what are the elements in your creative that actually drive results for you. And you need to start doing those testings now. That can happen in Meta, it can happen in Google. It doesn't always need to happen in CTV right off the bat. You can try and get a good understanding of your brand guidelines and what is the meaningful things that work out of those channels. That's what we mean by building your creative strategy is what's the message, what's the delivery, what works. It's not if I put a guy in an ad, if I put a girl in an ad, or if that background is red. It's what is the offer and message and differentiator for the brand that actually delivers results for the business. That's the key thing. So I just wanted to define creative strategy so it doesn't end up being the alternative. Johnny, one for this week, one for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for this week, I would say pull up your reporting. Find a channel or even campaign that's performing poorly or even sitting near zero. And before you do anything with that number, ask what you could be missing because the lens isn't scoped right. We've seen video content, even on traditional channels, underperform in last click measurement. And is that actually a performance result, or is it at near zero because you're measuring with something that was never going to be really seen in the first place? So there's a performance problem or a measurement problem in there. And those are two completely different things, and and in the report, they look identical. So I think that's a way to judge of what you're doing. Now, zooming out a little bit, kind of looking at this year, let's take a bigger look. I think the question is, what else could you be scaling into? We've seen Meta keeps getting more and more expensive. We watch that happen across the billions of dollars in ad spend, and we publish that actually weekly in the Media Buyer. If anyone would like to subscribe, shout out. And there are real value buys sitting in other channels right now. So here's kind of the question I want you guys to all sit with. Are you spending where you're spending because it's generally the best use of that money? or because it's the easiest thing to measure currently with what you're using to measure. Because from the inside, I think those can feel identical. Nobody sits down and says, I'm going to overinvest in Meta. You just spend where you can defend that number. And if that's how it works, your measurement isn't reporting on your media plan, it's kind of writing it. So make measurability part of the conversation before you sign anything. Ask every vendor you're evaluating, how do you measure this channel? What are your blind spots? And what does your data look like when it lands in the system? I already kind of call my source of truth. Every vendor has blind spots. The ones worth buying will tell you what those actually are. Because if you wait and you find out later, you don't just lose that answer, you might lose 2 quarters. And we've seen time and time again, brands that will likely kill the channel that was actually scaling them and putting more money into a campaign that's silently dragging down the results on the strength of a number that was never going to show you what it was. So zooming out, I think kind of taking an overall look of where else we could be spending that money to be more efficient.
Yeah, I think that is abundantly important. So I will add on to both of your guys. So my one for this week is, Matt, I'm going to draft off of yours on creative. Really define your creative strategy and creative testing platform. So at Query, we built a testing program where we actually name all of our ads, persona, concept, and hook. So we can actually now report out on what's working, what's not working, what concepts are actually driving, what hooks work the best for a brand. We talk about this concept of creative hit rate. So what percentage of the ads that we delivered, that we actually bought media around, scaled and drove business results? Because how many people run 1,000 Meta ads and 3 of them actually drive revenue? Well, you're forgetting that it still costs money to make the other 997. Let's add that into your media costs and let's actually see if you're profitable or not. So creative hit rate is really important for us because that also allows us to understand, to Matt's point, your CTV for end of year when you're going to make big investments, that you have creative that's actually going to do work well. For this year, my longer view is go to all of your media partners, go to everyone you're buying from, and make sure they're sending you data in a meaningful way that can actually help you make budgets for next year. So we ask for daily spend, daily results, daily impressions, because we want to be able to run an MMM next year, really have clarity around that. And you need to start that data collection now so that way you have enough information for later. And so that's my next one for this year, knowing that takes a long time to do. So creative and data, I think, is the key. It's why we have Matt from Mountain and Johnny from Northbeam here today. And I'm really excited. So thank you guys for joining us on this. Let's jump right into Q&A though. I have a bunch of questions. I'm going to pull us off the stage and we're going to answer some of these. So Matt, first one's for you. Okay, Matt, question for you is, what's the minimum budget to make CTV viable? If someone wants to get started, what are they looking at?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking it. The answer to that question is probably of a similar kind to the answer to the question, what does a house cost, or what does a car cost? And the truth is that the answer to those questions will depend on variables that oftentimes the advertiser is in the best position to answer. So I would begin with some notion of the audience size that your campaign intends to reach and the extent of the change that your campaign is designed to make. You want to show up into a channel with enough payload to be able to get a meaningful read on whether or not the creative that you're running is actually engaging with enough of that audience to be able to have a shot at being able to see detectable movement in the metrics that matter. And that's an individual decision, but it's one that platforms like Mountain can help advertisers make so that they don't, on the one hand, overspend in a channel when they really should be taking more of a conservative, especially in the beginning, a test, then learn, then scale approach, or conversely starving a channel of the resources that it needs in order to be able to get a quick read. But the general rule of thumb that I offer up to prospective customers who are looking at this is that for roughly the cost that it would take to really put like a new paid social ad format, say if Meta came out with a new one or TikTok came out with a new one next week, For the cost that it would take to really put one of those new ad products through the ringer and get a sense of whether it works, you can do that, the same sort of thing in CTV and get a sense of whether it works. And the typical advertiser in our world, mid-market, e-com customer, not unlike Hook at all, will come in typically and spend anywhere between $15,000 and $25,000 in their first month to get a sense of whether the channel is working. They'll take then the time to learn about what that data tells them, and then make the appropriate decisions and changes to help them grow durably from there.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think the thing for us when we came in on Mountain, our strategy was how do we overfund it to get quick results and have an understanding of what it's meaningful. So if I were to give people a perspective on this, is make it a percentage of your total investment, one that you will actually be able to see the output from. So 10% of your total buy, something like that. Because what you don't want to do is say, all right, I spent $50,000, but I'm spending $1 million a month on Meta. It's just going to get drowned out, and you're never going to know what's actually working, what's not working. So that's key, and I think a really important piece of it. Johnny, question for you on this is, what brands will work well for Northbeam? Do you guys work with B2B? Like, talk about what's the right customer for Northbeam?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a question that we get all the time. What brand is going to be a good fit for Northbeam? Typically, what we say is we have 3 different tools. We have our multi-touch attribution, incrementality, and media mix modeling. All of our brands do start with our MTA. And what I would say is if there's any type of digital conversion, we primarily work in that D2C space. So B2B may not be necessarily the best fit. However, if there's a digital conversion for us to track, even if it happens later down the customer journey, that's going to be a good fit for Northbeam, those digitally native brands. So, we work from a wide range, from brands spending, a few $1,000s per month in paid media to brands that are spending over $20 million a month on Meta alone. So we primarily work in that mid-market to enterprise space, but we have that. Got lost in my train of thought on that. I got a little too excited thinking about it, but yeah, I'd say that's going to be our main ICP there.
That's awesome. Amazing. All right, cool. Last question, Matt, for creative. We talked a lot about creative. I think that there's a misnomer around the level of creative needed for people to get started on CTV. Can you just talk through what it takes to get started on CTV from a creative standpoint?
Samir, you touched on this, I think, in your very well articulated notion of what creative strategy is. I'll share a bit of an anecdote. When I actually was drawn to the television advertising business side, because in the very early stages of my career, I spent over 7 years marketing a portfolio of video games for PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, and PC. And the portfolio of games that I managed grew to the point where I every year could count on a pretty healthy TV budget. And and with that healthy TV budget, I had pretty healthy creative budgets. I think the first TV commercial that I ever made had a $250,000 production budget. Boy, was that fun. And after a couple of years, I remember going into my CMO's office and asking for some budget for the TV campaign for the product I was going to launch, the hot new product I was going to launch into that category. And I asked for $200,000 because every creative budget I had was like $200,000. And I was thought, oh, this is amazing. And he said, no, you can have $35,000. And I protested. I kind of threw a mini tantrum in his office because that number seemed crazy to me. And what he said to me was prescient and correct, and something that I've echoed many times since, which is that, again, the cost of creative is sort of like asking, what does a house cost? And it varies so much, and it's based on production factors and casting factors and format, like animation versus live action. But that the cost can be a constraint that can also be healthy, that having a lower budget can remove options creatively from consideration and really force people whose job it is to come up with brilliant creative ideas that bring the brand's value proposition to life to get clever and to get resourceful. And the ad that we made for $35,000 was spectacular, and it worked brilliantly, even though it didn't have as many bells and whistles as some of the previous campaigns that I've worked on. So for me, the considerations when I think about starting, number one, are really clearly defining and having a very clear picture of the strategic target audience you're going to engage. And then what do we know about them? And given our product or our service, what's that hook, that thing that can really stand out, given what we know about the audience? And then working with really creative people who can take those ideas and translate them into something that will leverage the sight, sound, and motion of television in a way that's engaging. And if your CMO like mine comes back and drops your budget by 80%, know that that's not necessarily a deal breaker. We have advertisers on the Mountain platform who've built really good, really effective TV ads for under $10,000 in creative, which is a great way of being able to stand up something and test. So those are just some of the things that I've come to learn, both from being a practitioner, but then also being on the sort of the business side of TV advertising.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt. I know we're coming up on time, so I want to be, I'm going to start closing us up, but I think creative is one that is really actually easy because there's so much influencer and social creative and social video that exists, and it's a matter of cutting and designing. And I am not a creative person, but the stuff I have seen people be able to do is like wild and fascinating. And so I know that whole world is changing right now, and I'm excited to kind of see it. But Matt, Johnny, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining us and being on this webinar together. And what I would say is this story of a hook and how they were able to kind of scale CTV. The strategy was ours, but the execution came together because of you guys. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think that it was really exciting to see the overall results and the continued results, right? We talk about durability of revenue and they are continuing to scale and grow rapidly. So really excited about that. So thank you guys for that. With that, I think if anybody needs anything or wants to learn more, please check out Mountain and Northbeam online. You can follow these guys on LinkedIn as well if you haven't already. I highly recommend it. And then if you need anything from Query is a media buying agency. We help support brands both in e-com, retail, pharma, finance, really help them understand brand awareness and performance marketing. You can check us out on LinkedIn or weareqry.com. I also have a podcast called Chief Advertiser. Come check us out. Come chat. Looking forward to more. But with that, thank you guys.
Thank you, Samir. Thanks, Johnny. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys. Thank you so much.